Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. In the last episode, we finished up Case 1 and began Case 2 with a warning from SOSEKI saying that he thinks that a second case that we were not made aware of until now, that involved him, is the catalyst for Professor Miko Toba sending lies to Susato over here in the British Empire and forcing her to come home early. The only reason that I can think of that he would do that to get Susato back home was because he thinks that there's something that went on in this case that could endanger her, because he's trying to protect her, right? I mean, he is her father. He seems to like her and appreciate her exploits quite a lot. I mean, he seems like a good dad, just straight up. He seems like a good dad. So the reason that he would want Susato to come home is obviously to keep her out of harm's way, to keep her safe. Maybe he thinks that she's getting into shady territory, things that she shouldn't be messing with, and he wants to protect her that way. Or maybe, and I'm being more drastic here just because it's Ace Attorney and being more drastic is in our nature, maybe it's because she would be in imminent danger working with stuff like this. And we also, there's the big mystery from the end of the first game where it's like we had the list of the certain people, the names. I don't remember the third name. Or I don't remember one of the names that we had never heard of before, but one of them was Kazuma, and the other one, I think Magnus McGilded was on there, and then you also had you had the other name that we didn't know what it was. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact names that were in that list, but I do remember Kazuma, and I think Magnus McGilded were in there, which was interesting. I wonder, the fact that extra name, they didn't seem to like know who that was. They're just like, I've never heard that name before. So I don't think that person is going to pop up in this case. But I do think that the two gentlemen that we saw in the middle of that case that we never heard from again, that I kept pointing out, I was like, we still don't know who those two fucking people are. They're going to pop up in this case. Absolutely, for sure. Don't know why. They're going to pop up in this case. So let's get at it. It was 6 months ago, a mysterious incident that unfolded on the wintry streets of London. A young woman was found lying on the snowy pavement of Briar Road with a knife in her back. Fortunately, her life was spared, but she was unconscious for several days following the incident. The fog was thick, and nobody saw her attacker, but by a cruel twist of fate, a visiting Japanese student was walking behind her at the time and was duly arrested. That man was Soseki-san, and the man who effected his arrest was Mr. Sholmes. Believing in our compatriot's innocence, Susato-san and I decided to represent Soseki-san in court. And after a grueling trial of many twists and turns, we finally managed to prove his innocence. Joyful, joyous, jubilant jubilation! Was the man's final reaction after the trial, but his jubilant jubilation was short-lived. We received a telegram from Mr. Sholmes the following morning. The victim of the Briar Road stabbing has regained consciousness. Hurry to Bart's at once. So Susato-san and I summoned a hansom and headed immediately to the hospital. I've never heard of that word before. I wonder what a hansom looks like. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man? Got a big mouse rat over there. I think it's a mouse, considering the ears. But the... No, it's too big for a mouse. I don't know. I didn't think rats had ears like that. There you are at last. Good morning, Mr. Sholmes. I think not. Oh! You're late! What on earth took you so long? Your telegram only arrived at 5 o'clock, Mr. Sholmes, and it's a 20-minute ride to the hospital. That's right, and it's 5:30 now. I think we made very good time. The time is utterly irrelevant. The fact is, I have been waiting for what has felt like an eternity. In point of fact, I myself was awoken at 4 this morning by a telegram boy, and feeling it was somewhat unjust that I alone had been roused at such an hour, I sent one to you. Well, thanks for that. I was about to say the same thing. Anyway, you're here now, so the victim is over there. She's only just regained consciousness. Oh, we finally get to meet her. You should introduce yourselves, and I shall observe from here. So that's the lady who was found on the snow-covered pavement with the knife in her back. Her name is... Ah, yes, here we are. Miss Green. Well, that's fitting, I guess. I have to examine things first. Let's look at the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man before we talk to her. This rounded wooden figure isn't the most charming, is it? Ah, I don't think that's a decoration, Mr. Naruhodo. It's an artist's mannequin, I believe, used when practicing sketching the human form in different poses. Really? It's not exactly what you'd call a typical figure for that purpose, though, is it? No, I suppose not. I confess I've never seen one quite so full-figured before. That's one way of saying it. Well, if you want to draw a full-figured person, it's the right tool for the job. Look, there's a photograph in this frame here. Oh, who are you? Oh yes, it's a picture of a young gentleman. He looks to be about the same age as Miss Green, I would say. Perhaps the young woman's special someone, do you think? My, Mr. Naruhodo, I didn't know you had a sense for matters of the heart. Not in the least. I sincerely said the first thing I thought of. Well, at least he's honest about it. Like, I don't know anything about love. Ah, this looks like the patient's treatment notes. Let's see. Do not feed. Wow. What is this place, a zoo? You know, I seem to remember seeing an almost identical sign at our local park. For the pigeons, yes. This is a person. Or woman. I hope she hasn't read this. Nothing particular of note. No, the rat isn't particularly of note. Eek! A mouse, Mr. Naruhodo! An enormous mouse! Vermin in a hospital? That doesn't seem the best. But it looks like a very healthy specimen, doesn't it? Oh, but it looks like a very healthy specimen, doesn't it? It's very plump. I'm not sure we can say that's down to the excellence of this facility, if that's what you were thinking. Maybe the do not feed means for the mice. It's like, don't feed the mice. It's a note to the patient. There are lots of bottles in that cabinet, aren't there? Do you think it's safe to keep them like that? Hee hee. If you were a patient here, I feel sure you'd take some medicine by mistake when you were half asleep. That is a worry, but at least there is a cabinet. But at least the cabinet has a lock, even if it's only a flimsy-looking one. Oh, I've no doubt you'd manage to unlock that somehow while you were half asleep as well. There are limits to even what I can do when I'm half asleep, you know, Miss Susato. That's a big bag. That must be a bag of Miss Green's personal belongings. She would have been brought directly here after she was found stabbed on the pavement, though. I expect a friend or family member probably brought some things for her. Alright then, let's see what's inside. Change of clothes, no doubt, and... No, Mr. Naruhodo, you must never scrutinize a young maiden's personal belongings. But the young maiden might have chocolates or biscuits or caramel. Maybe you're the one that needs the do not feed side, Ryunosuke. Speaking of which, I accidentally did that, but it looks like we've got some things here. Secondhand book receipt for Natsume. Ah yes, the books. And then we have the nearby street map of where she was stabbed. But she was actually stabbed on the left side of the road, right? And your books is over there. Bourbon books is up there. Okay. Anything else? Does not seem to be the case. Let's see here. Good morning. Artist, I see. Hello. I'm, Ryunosuke Naruhodo from the Empire of Japan. Oh no, was it your knife that... Are you the man who... No. I'm a lawyer. And I'm Susato Mikotoba. Pleased to meet you. Oh no, was it your knife then? Are you the one... No, I assure you, I'm Mr. Naruhodo's judicial assistant. We heard that you'd regained consciousness and wanted to come give you our best wishes. Best wishes for me? Thank you. I'm Olive Green. I'm an artist. Well, no, that's not right, is it? What I mean is, I'm trying to be an artist. Well, what I really mean is, I desperately want to be an artist. But the truth is, I don't have any talent. I know I don't. It's no wonder I was stabbed in the back. I don't think that's related, actually. Gosh, this young woman seems to bend over backwards to put herself down. Seeing as we're here, we should ask her about what happened from her perspective, I suppose. To suddenly be struck in the back by a blade as you were walking along the pavement. What a terrible experience you had, Miss Green. It was so cold that day, and the fog was so thick, I couldn't see a thing. That was 4 days ago now, I think. Is that right? Yes, that's right. I'm afraid you've been comatose all that time. But the case has been solved, hasn't it? While I've been here in hospital, I mean. Indeed it has, my dear madam. Spectacularly by none other than I, Herlock Sholmes. Mr. Sholmes, as you well know, it was Mr. Naruhodo's hard work in court that solved the case. Are you yet to hear what happened, Miss Green? Yes, I'm afraid so. A gentleman from the police force is supposed to be coming to fill me in shortly. Oh, I see. Me coming around seems to have made everyone frantically busy. I'm so sorry. I should never have regained consciousness. Wow! Holy shit. It was selfish of me. Oh no! We're all so relieved that you're on the mend, Miss Green. Really, we are. With that kind of attitude, maybe her surname should be Blue, not Green. That wouldn't really fit now, would it? So, you're an artist, are you, Miss Green? Oh no, I couldn't possibly claim that. I'm a fledgling artist at best. I mean, I'm a student of art, really. At the Thorndike Academy of Fine Arts. Oh my, an Academy of Fine Arts. Great Britain is such a wonderful country. Tell me, Miss Green, do you live hereabouts? Oh no, actually. I don't deserve it, but I have a little flat on Brixton Road. I see. How very interesting. Oh no, is it? Brixton is some 10 stops away on the underground from here. And Thorndike Academy is a mere 3-minute walk from Brixton Town Centre. Does that matter, Mr. Sholmes? Perhaps not, but Briar Road is a far less salubrious part of town by comparison, dwelt in by those of inferior means, including the maleficent Mr. Moustache. Inferior means? I suppose Soseki-san does fit the bill. It struck me as somewhat out of the ordinary for a young fine arts student to be walking in such a district. That's all. What's this? She suddenly claimed up. Mr. Sholmes, you should be ashamed of yourself prying into a young maiden's private affairs. Oh dear, do forgive me. If you don't mind. I'm being discharged shortly, so I need to pack up my things. Oh, yes, of course. We won't keep you. Thank you so much, Miss Green. Is there a Mr. Narrow Fodder here? Mr. Narrow Fodder? Narrow Fodder now. Well, if you're looking for Naruhodo, the lawyer, that's me, but... Ah, Mr. Narrow Fodder. Good. This is for you. It's a message from a Mr. Saucy Nutsmeg. What? Alright. Oh. That's so dumb, I love it. Saucy Nutsmeg. Mr. Natsume sent a message to me? But why would a policeman be delivering a message from Mr. Natsume? Exactly. What's going on? What's a Scotland Yard constable doing playing delivery boy at this time in the morning? Ah, what are you waiting for? Let me see that. Oh. Well, this is most unexpected. Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes? Is something wrong, Mr. Sholmes, he says. Have you not seen this note? No, how could I have? It would seem that London's criminals have no intention of letting the great detective rest. A new case calls. A case of murder, no less. We must depart at once. Murder? Call a cab. Time is of the essence. But the trouble is, we've yet to read Mr. Natsume's note. I was thinking we ought to pay him a visit in his lodgings once we did. That will be entirely convenient. Convenient? What do you mean? It's all here in the note, my dear fellows. The murder we must investigate took place at Mr. Moustache's lodgings. Wait, what? I'll hear a fiacre... What the fuck? What the fiacre is that? At once. Never heard of that one. It was only yesterday that Soseki-san was in court and we were dispelling doubts about his innocence. And now, the very next day, there's a murder at the man's own address? He may very well be the unluckiest man alive. Or so it seemed to us at the time, but we were soon to discover it was worse than we thought. Oh, so he's even worse than the unluckiest man alive. That's always fun. So what do we have here? Mr. Natsume's lodgings, ground floor. Oh, so it was one of the guys that we saw before. Interesting. What on earth? Oh my, the gentleman is deceased without a question. He's dead. Locum student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. Mr. Natsume. Oh, why? Why is this happening? Why to me? I've only just got out of court. Yesterday, I was finally home after 2 days of misery. And then I wake up the next day to this. No early bird should catch a worm like this. Woeful worm without wiggle. I see you're in high spirits again this morning, Mr. Moustache. Ah! Not the horrible airlock Sholmes. Shoo! Shove off! Show yourself the door! I never invited you! Mr. Sholmes came here with us. I'm quite sure he'll be able to help you, Mr. Natsume. I am entirely at your disposal, Mr. Moustache. What can I do for you? Ah, Gregsy. Nice to see you again. There they are, already. The busybodies. Ah, Inspector Gregson. What a pleasant surprise. Pleasant, is it? Gives me heartburn every time I see your face at a crime scene, Sholmes. Ha! I deduce, Inspector, that your heartburn is a result of your excessive consumption of fried food. Good morning, Inspector. This is a crime scene. Don't you go touching anything. Or good morning to you too, Sunshine. Well, we got everything to look at here. Also, why the hell are you walking around in those clogs when it's cold as fuck outside? Well, they're not clogs. That's the wrong name for them. They're like the little wooden sandal shoe things that you have in Japan that I don't know what they're called. Unfortunately, I can't think of the word, but it describes my vocabulary as well. fuck? I can't remember the word. I'm so bad at vocab. I need to, like, just take a vocabulary lesson, really. Oh, God. It means, the word means to be unaware of the knowledge of something. Ignorant. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm ignorant in the case of Japanese shoes. What a terrible thing to have happened. It's only been 3 days since I was arrested for the incident on the pavement outside. And then, having finally regained my freedom, it starts happening all over again. Endless existence of excruciating experiences. So, the victim lived here on the ground floor, and your room is just 1 story up, isn't it? Yes, that's right. In a way, we were neighbors, I suppose. So did you know the victim? Were you friends? I would have asked, is that the extent of your relationship with the victim? Did you find the body? More than anything. That's what I want to know right now. I want to know if you found the body. What's the matter with Soseki-san now? It was an innocent enough question, wasn't it? Why does he seem so shaken by it? Well, I suppose he wasn't a complete stranger. But did he ever invite me to his room? Never! On my honor, I swear it! What an extreme reaction. You're probably wishing you'd never asked now, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? When we found him here, I felt wretched, which is why I sent word asking you to come. We? Who's we? Who else found him? Through that inspector over there! I guess we'll have to talk to the inspector for more on that. What is this? This is gonna be important. Oi! I said hands off! You're gonna mess up my crime scene! Oh, no, I just wanted to look, that's all. No chance! I know your kind. You'll mess it up just by looking at it. Ugh, someone's in a bad mood. There's certainly some bad air in here, isn't there? Laughing at a crime scene, huh, Sholmes? Alright, it sounds like I'd better talk to the inspector first and try to curry some favor. Will do. I'll just click on his chips first. So, Inspector, what was the victim's name? Who was he? Mr. William Shamspeare. God damn it! Mr. William Shamspeare. He was a lodger here. As you can probably tell, he was an actor. A bit of a dead loss, as it happens. Or just dead. Mr. Shamspeare. It was the landlord, old Mr. Garadeb, and the other lodger, Mr. Natsume, who found him. The fella didn't rise at his usual hour, so Garadeb got worried and kicked the door down. So a locked room mystery, huh? But doesn't Mr. Garadeb have a bad leg? Ah, yeah, you're right there. It was that jittery Japanese hunchback over there who actually did the kicking. Really? Soseki-san? The victim was pretty hard up, it seems. Even done some time inside for petty crimes. He had no money, no place to go, and no friends. His only acquaintances were the people in this house, not the bad people in this house. Miserable life and a miserable end to it. So, what exactly is Mr. Natsume still doing here? He's not involved in the investigation, so shouldn't you have sent him away from the crime scene? Well, I'm not saying it's because the fella looks odd or anything, or that he acts suspicious, but I thought it would be prudent to take a statement from the cohabiter. You nearly said culprit there, didn't you? Oh dear. Mr. Natsume appears to be under suspicion again. Certainly seems that way. He does just come across as such an odd fellow, doesn't he? Poor man. How unfortunate. Anyway, I can't say much until the coroner gets here. But I don't think the fellow's been a goner that long. The body's still warm. Even if the inspector would allow it, I don't think I could bring myself to touch a dead body. Yeah, me neither, I don't think. So, can I look at things now? Can I look at things now? What the hell was that? Oh, there's more stuff over here. Nice pose, Mr. Sholmes. Mr. Sholmes, what are you doing? Huh, You need only observe to know it, my dear fellow. Investigating, naturally. There's nothing natural about that pose. Mr. Sholmes, have you made some miraculous discovery? Patience, my dear madam, patience. We've not been here in this room 5 minutes. So far, all I've managed to deduce is what actually happened. Okay, my goodness! But isn't that everything we need to know, Mr. Sholmes? Now that you propose the idea, I believe one could indeed see it that way. At the present time, I have managed to draw 2 incontrovertible conclusions. The first is that there was a physical struggle here last night in which the victim fought for his life. Ah! Mr. Natsume, what's wrong? Is something that Mr. Sholmes said significant somehow? No, don't mind me. Forget I was here. You fought with him, didn't you? And my second conclusion is that there was a poison lingering in the air here last night that passed the victim's lips. Nonsense! Ah. That was a weird ah. Alright, Mr. Natsume, why are you reacting so extremely to Mr. Sholmes' deductions? No, please, pretend I'm not here. Invisible, ineffable, inscrutable, insignificant. Impossible to ignore. You must tell us everything, Mr. Sholmes. Spare no detail. But of course. Let the theatrical tragedy before us be unraveled by my great deductions, presented for your pleasure in 2 acts. We've heard some truly astounding great deductions from Mr. Sholmes in the past. No doubt this will be no exception. What miracles will unfold before our eyes this time? So, my dear fellows, for your delight and wonder, let the curtains rise. For Herlock Sholmes' Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Already a great deduction, and we just started. This is going to be a good case. Cause of death. Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate, which contains, you will observe, 1/2 of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful? Indubitably. Why is the soap set so purposefully on the dish? Like the victim's Last Supper, in fact. Yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. It appears the young man's appetite was his undoing. Taking up arms in the form of his cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. But London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison, and that tainted the contents of the plate. The soap and the lather about the young man's mouth are too perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to excessive ingestion of foul soap. Though personally, I have a greater interest in the taste of foul candle wax, of course. Huh? You just say it. Okay. That's the most absurd thing I think I've heard out of his mouth. Suicide or murder is the question. The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall death occurred during the victim's Last Supper. Did the man dine and die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. The careful criminal could have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. Though forced open now, at the time of the incident, this door was locked. and the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, when the victim consumed the poison, he must have been alone. Alone with his inferior soap, from whence wafted an inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end in tragic solitude. We can take comfort only in the fact that it was... We can take comfort only in the fact that his soul was well cleansed on its way to the hereafter. No possible perpetrator present. So, he thinks it was suicide. Thus concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes's Great Deduction. That's about normal. Par for the course. There's just one thing, Mr. Sholmes. You are disposed to identifying just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Pray, what concerns you? Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think the man would have eaten soap? It is quite apparent that this man had barely a penny to his name. It is a curious thing, but to one so destitute, soap can suddenly appear quite irresistibly appetizing. How extraordinary! In truth, I have tried a little soap myself in the past. You've eaten it, you mean? My dear fellow, it was some time ago now. My postulation was that it would cleanse my gut. And did it? As I writhed in agony on the floor and spilt the contents of my stomach, yes, I believe it did. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it. Believe me, I wouldn't eat it, even if you did. There's something that troubles me as well, actually. Oh? What's that? It's Mr. Natsume. Oh! I couldn't help noticing him shuddering and quivering out of the corner of my eye, almost as if Mr. Sholmes's deductions touched a nerve somehow. No, nonsense! Well, that clenched teeth episode didn't last. I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective's deductions may need some gentle corrections in order to reach the actual truth. Yes, Mr. Sholmes's observations and deductions are sometimes a little too sharp. Oh boy, I had to yawn there for a second. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it in at an obtuse angle. When he does that, it falls to us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do. Yes, we must... Oh wait, I think we said that. Alright then, let's see what we can do. Yes, we must pick out the key words in Mr. Sholmes's quite brilliant deductions and discreetly exchange them for something that makes a little more sense. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Mr. Sholmes meant to say in the first place. In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? Once again, my dear fellows, for your continued delight and wonder, let the curtain rise for Sherlock Holmes's Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1. Course correction. Okay, let's see what we can do here. I didn't actually spot anything, really. I wanted to look at a few things, but, I didn't spot anything just like that jumped out at me from the beginning. So let's skip through this. Foam at the mouth. I mean, I agree that it's poison, but I think he probably ingested it via the teacup. We notice a large dining plate which contains soap. Is that really soap? I want to check the soap first. I want to make sure it's soap. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. Well, you can't deny that a fork implies the man was eating something, or about to eat something. Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat some soap, I should prefer to use a fork than attempt to eat it with chopsticks. And of course, only half of the bar of soap is left on the plate. But might there not be some other explanation? Something material that proves whether or not the man really ate some soap. Wouldn't it just be the soap itself? I mean, can I check the teacup? Do you think he was drinking tea with his soap? The cup's empty, so there's no way of knowing. Ah, how about this for an idea? Perhaps the cup was full of water, and he was dissolving soap in it so he could gulp down as much as possible? Please remember that he may not actually have been the soap lover that he's made out to be. I can't check the soap itself. Maybe this hat down here? It doesn't look like I can click on anything other than the fork. Can I check the fork? I suppose you'd eat soap with a fork, wouldn't you? I don't think it's a question of which implement you'd use. You shouldn't eat soap full stop. But then why? Why does the man have a fork in his hand? Oh dear, I understand your frustration, Mr. Naruhodo, but please don't take it out on me. The point is, if we decide the man used this fork to eat the soap, we wouldn't be changing Mr. Sholmes' deduction. So we really ought to consider some other clues. Well, I agree with that. Oh, so the whole thing is rotatable. Is that blood on the back of his head? Oh, there's another piece over here. That's probably it. Look, there's more soap on the floor here. Mr. Shamspear must have really loved the stuff. Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Naruhodo. Look closely at this soap. Do you see that it would fit together perfectly with the half bar on the table? What the? How can that be? I think that they are two halves of the same bar that broke apart. Well, if that's the case, then it's obviously that this means that he wasn't going to eat it, right? It seems weird to entertain the idea that he was going to eat soap in the first place, but, you know, that's Sholmes for you. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the other piece of soap reveals the answer. It being the other half of the soap on the table. In short, the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really, for no depths of hunger could drive any man to attempt to eat soap. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, took only a single bite. But that begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table. An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, and one that furnishes us with the answer we seek. For London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. I think it probably just tainted the contents of the teacup, right? Mr. Sholmes is still pushing the soap argument then. Perhaps he's suggesting the man licked the soap rather than ate it. If soap in London is that poisonous, I don't think I want to be washing my hands with it. That's true. But there are no signs of any food in this room at all. Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it? It would have to be the teacup, right? Well, we shattered it, so I think that's what it is. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the teacup. Indeed, cups have been the vessel of choice for practicing poisoners over the centuries. And it would appear that this victim drank every last drop. There's no sign of food anywhere in the room. Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to the ingestion of poison contained in this teacup. I mean, I do think it was poison in the tea, but we can't really know unless a test is done first, right? The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? Well, I don't think he would poison his own teacup, right? So that kind of answers that question already. The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? The single teacup suggests the answer. Ah, the Western vessel for infused hot drinks again. It's already featured heavily in our deductions so far. Yes, we can imagine that shortly before his death, Mr. Shamspear was having a drink of tea. There would be nothing remarkable about that, but what troubles me is Mr. Natsume's reaction when he heard Mr. Sholmes suggest it. There's more to this deduction than it seems. We must closely examine the scene of the crime again for some more clues. Oh, he's got 2 teacups. It's another Western vessel. It's a teacup! And it, too, is empty. Given that he's actually holding this one in his hand, we can assume that this is the cup from from which Mr. Shamspear was actually drinking. But if that's the case, this changes everything. Everything we've deduced up to now is turned on its head. I have a bad feeling about this. I almost don't want to say it. Yes, I know exactly how you feel.
Take that!
So this proves that there were 2 people there at the scene. Did the man dine and die alone? This other teacup suggests the answer. Yes, there were 2 teacups in this room all alone. In other words, this is a strong indication that at the victim's Last Supper, there was a guest present. At the very least, we can say now with certainty that somebody else was here in this room last night, taking tea with the victim. What are you talking about? Utterly, unbelievably, unjustly unreasonable. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which case, what more can we deduce about this possible guest at the table? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Nice way to segue that back into the actual deduction. Do you mean to say you know exactly who was in this room at the time of the victim's death? Indeed, what reveals the answer is, of course, the broken lock. I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going now. I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the halcyon days of eating too much soap. But the identity of the guest who was here last night when the victim passed away is something I have a very bad feeling about. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. No, I suppose not. Time to look around again. Is it the stack of books? These are the books that he brought with him, that he got from the store that night, isn't it? At first glance, it seems the only things in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked these 3 books initially. I wonder what they are. Let's see, the titles read... The Picture of Monsieur Lecoq, or Lecoq, I guess, Canterbury Yearnings, and A Meal for Gaborio. Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before. It could just be an incredible coincidence, but they're the exact same 3 books that Mr. Natsume purchased the other day. What? Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident when Miss Green was stabbed. Soseki-san had just been to a bookshop and bought them, that's right. And now those 3 titles are here in the room of the victim. Yet Mr. Natsume claims never to have been here before. What does this mean, do you think? I really don't know what to make of it.
Take that!
Oof. Not looking good for our mustachioed gentleman friend. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the pile of familiar books. Quite so. It's no mere coincidence that these 3 titles are here in this room. It's the link to the truth. Ah! Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at a secondhand bookshop. That's just a coincidence! In that case, you will be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment. No, never, non-negotiable! If you can't bring your own copies here, it proves that these 3 books are in fact yours. Having purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings, you were arrested the very next day. So you could conceivably have brought the books here on that evening, but you never mentioned that. In other words, you could only have brought these 3 books here to the victim's room. Nice snapping. Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial concluded at the Old Bailey. I really like the way they did that. In short, there is only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in his room last night as a result of poisoning. And that same night, the victim had a visitor. And that visitor... They're just trying to one-up each other, I love it. Was you, Mr. Soseki Natsume. Thus concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes's Great Deduction. That sucks for you, buddy. But we know you didn't do it because you walked free, right? So how are we going to get him out of this? Oh boy. Not again. Not again. Not again. Not again! Well then, Mr. Natsume. It would appear you're gonna have to accompany me down to the yard. Again. But wait! Hold your horses! Yes? Door, key, locked! Entry, exit, entirely impossible! He's so flustered he's being even stranger than normal. He's actually making a solid argument. What, you think that's an alibi? You could have just made a copy. What? You live in the same building after all. You'd have had plenty of opportunity, I'm sure. Yeah, I just noticed that he has like an extra... I'm guessing that's fried fish in there? Fish and chips? So he got the deluxe portion today. I guess he got paid after the last case. But... Misery me! Sorry, sir. You'll get your chance to get your side of the story later. Oof. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Moustache. You horrible Sherlock Holmes! He really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he? Come on now, no dilly-dallying. Outside, there's a carriage waiting. Welcome, student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but... You have to help me, please, please! I'm innocent! Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it. And one more thing! Oh, yes? My poor little kitty cat. Please give him his breakfast for me. Okay. So we're feeding the cat now. We know that the cat, I don't know if the cat's going to be a big part of this case, but we do know that at least he gets his cat back to Japan with him because the cat was in the photo in the last case. So the cat comes out all right, which is pretty much what we care about in this case, right? And so his evil curse still apparently unbroken. So Soseki-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective. My dear fellow, that honor belongs to you. That's true. We were the one that really kind of put him behind bars again. Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. And of course... What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garadeb, who discovered Mr. Shamspear. Ah, Mr. John Garadeb, yes. I expect we could find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right, we must remember to go and talk to him later then. Okay, so we'll have to talk to him later, but for now... We will just go ahead and examine this first. And here we have another disproportionately large machine. This looks like a meter of some kind. Ah, this is a gas meter, I think. It seems that in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with coins. Ah, I see. Yes, now you've pointed it out. I can see that there's a slot just here that looks like it would take a coin. So you mean if you put a coin here? That's right. That would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lights and heating. So if you were a poor person with no money, you'd have to sleep in the freezing cold? Yes, or if you were just a scatterbrain with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank. Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. Yeah, that sounds like it sucks. I wonder if that's historically accurate or not. We can look at the light as well. This is a gas wall light, isn't it? It must be connected to a gas pipe in the wall. Gas lights, a gas stove. London really is a city of gas. But now that I think about it, Mr. and Mrs. Garadeb had an open fire on the top floor, didn't they? Oh yes, you're right. I don't recall seeing a gas stove up there. Well, I much prefer a real fire anyway. It's so much cozier. Okay, well that was worthless. You can tell he was poor with those... Well, he had no window either. As we've seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. A vestige of the former window tax that Britons had to pay. What a strange things they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had in a property. It's extraordinary. It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to avoid an unaffordable tax. Oh! What is it, Miss Usato? If you look closely, a number of the bricks are loose. You're right, they are. Soap? Oh yes, it looks as though an amateur has broken out a few of them just here. Was it Mr. Shamspear who did it, I wonder? But being the lodger renting this room. Ah, look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside, there's a little ledge. And there's something on it. What? Outside? I guess we have to check it again. Brr, it's so cold outside. You can feel it through this gap. It did snow all last night. It would be cold. But more importantly, what is it on the ledge out there? What are those snow-covered lumps? It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lined up on a ledge outside the window? I have no idea. But the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, that's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined up outside the window? I think perhaps we should take one. There are two, after all. Oh dear, I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at this soap. Ah. Do you see, in the middle there? There's a patch that's a different color. It's sort of transparent, but... Some sort of fancy design, I suppose. Only in Great Britain. It looks like the Hinomaru flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful! It's probably a very expensive brand. Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackle old room? You know, with the fact that we had to go through government secrets in the last episode, and the government is involved in covering up this case, I'm starting to think that the soap found in this apartment is possibly one of the things that we need to look out for. Look at these extravagant, bright costumes. Somehow they look out of place in this room with its grim, shady goings-on. This one looks like a king's attire. A king? I've always dreamed of being a king. Oh, I think you'd be more suited to a feudal lord. A daimyo or such like. With a chon mage top knot? Every Japanese man wishes he had a chon mage. Or is it chonmage? I'm not sure. Oh, you'd look wonderful with one, and you already have the sword. Can you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a chonmage and a sword? I actually could not, because I don't know what that is. It was definitely more of a Japanese-oriented game. There's not much on these shelves, is there? Just this wine glass and bottle. And both of them are cracked. Yes, not much use, are they? What's the matter? Oh, I was just reminded of the Reaper, that's all. Prosecutor Lord Van Zeeks? Yes, he's so reckless with his wine glasses, I was thinking it's a waste and that he should donate some to the needy. You can suggest it next time we meet. Which will probably be the next case, unless it's not Van Zeeks this time, which would be weird, but, you know, weirder things have happened. I'm guessing this is the stage that we can look at there. I wanted to look at that in the wall, but I guess we can't. So let's check the stage, I guess. This is some sort of makeshift stage, I think, isn't it? Where does the audience sit, though, for the nightly Shakespeare performances? Actors aspiring to the great stage must practice their art, Mr. Naruhodo, with or without an audience. In fact, on a related note, perhaps you should set up a mock bench for the defense in your office. What? Then you could practice your art every single day. I'll think about it, if you promise to don a beard and play the role of the judge. Well, if that would help you achieve your goal. This I have to see. I agree. Okay, so now let's check the dead body. Oh, the poor man, so young to die. Do you suppose it was a very painful death, being poisoned as he was? I don't know. All we can do now is hope that he'll be reborn to a better life. Yes, I suppose you're right. I wonder... Do you think that putting our hands together in a Japanese prayer will help a British soul? Sorry? I made sure that I had a reference at the ready for just an occasion as this, actually. This book is entitled The Beginner's Guide to Praying for the Departed, The British Way. I'll just reread it now. One moment. There's quite a spine on that book, isn't there? Yeah, I think we'll leave you to read that on your own, Susato. And I think that's it. That's all we can look at in here. So, go ahead and move. Locations have been added. But it looks like that this episode is coming up on 1 hour. So before we continue on with the investigation, we're going to end it here. So, once again, thank you guys very much for watching. This has been Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, but specifically Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve. Working through the second case here. Will Mr. Natsume be acquitted? The answer is yes. But the main question on my mind is, what happened to that second gentleman that we saw with this one all the way back in case 4 of the first game? Will we find him? Was he the culprit? Is he helping him do criminal things, like making soap that contains government secrets? Potentially. I have no clue. But we'll find out next time. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys then.